Hello, everybody, and good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Capitol View, a Daily Journal and djournal.com production. I'm Brad Locke, your host, your co host, along with Bobby Harrison, our Capitol Bureau reporter. And if you're tuning in for the first time to this, we do this every Monday afternoon during this current legislative session, just kind of breaking down what's happening in Jackson with the lawmakers. And Bobby, of course, has it covered every day in the Daily Journal and at djournal.com. Bobby, how you doing down there on
All
this
right, Brad,
Monday?
how you doing? On
Can't
President,
complain, Bobby. Yeah, it's President's Day. That's right. Happy President's Day, Bobby.
same to you.
We still got to work. That's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think we're finally starting to see some things get moving along in this session, Bobby. Now that we're into mid-February, uh, it's an extra long session as we've noted with the coming off an election year. Let's first talk about this transportation plan, Bobby. It's going to be it's going to be one of the major issues going through this session. Of course, you've got the Mississippi Economic Council has this proposal on what they think the state needs to do to keep the state's road and bridge infrastructure to acceptable levels. And this week, in fact, on Wednesday, as your story notes, Bobby, from Sunday, House and Senate Transportation Committees will meet jointly to hear from the MDOT on what the state needs. So I guess this kind of gets the ball rolling on that, doesn't it?
That's right, Brad. It does get the ball rolling. This is MEC's putting a lot of effort into this, Mississippi Economic Council, and they have put forth a proposal to increase spending on roads and bridges throughout the state, $375 million per year to deal with substandard bridges and deteriorating state highways and also local county and city roads. But to come up with $375 million a year is going to take some type of revenue increase, whether it's an increase in the gasoline tax or some other mechanism. So it's going to be a big issue and a controversial issue. And really, at this point, nobody really knows how it's going to play out as far as if they're going to come up with the money. So it's really, so many times you go into the legislative process and you can kind of guess what's going to happen, make an educated guess. But on this issue, it's there's a question about whether legislators are going to be willing to increase the gasoline tax. I know the gasoline's a lot cheaper right now, but still, a question about whether legislators are going to be willing to increase the gasoline tax or come up with some other type of source of revenue to fund this very ambitious program.
Yeah, Mississippi Economic Council, their plan is called Accelerate Mississippi, and they want an additional $375 million annually committed to this to get the infrastructure in the state up to what they see as acceptable. And you mentioned how they might do it, Bobby. So I'm kind of wondering, like you said, this could end up being a very contentious issue, what with the governor and other Republican leaders wanting to have some tax cuts. And so Governor Bryant, I know, said that he's in support of a revenue increase for this plan if there's an equivalent reduction in revenue.
That's right. And other people, say, we got, first of all, we got a slowdown in state revenue collections right now. And the governor had to make cuts just a couple of weeks ago to several state agencies, small cuts, but still cuts. And he dipped into the rainy day fund. Are we okay, Brad?
Keep going.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. And he also had to dip into the rainy day fund to deal with that sluggish state tax collections. But the governor had before he did that, he had said that he'd be amenable to an increase in revenue for highways if there was equivalent reductions in revenue in other places. But other people say, how can you reduce revenue in other places when education's underfunded? There's a shortfall in Medicaid. Corrections is asking for a significant increase. So you got several agencies needing more money. So a lot of people question how the governor's proposal would work if you cut the income tax for instance, to make up to offset a increase in the gasoline tax. So like I said, I mean, there's just a lot of unanswered questions right now. And right now the state of Mississippi we have a state tax on gasoline of a little bit more than 18 cents a gallon, and it's one of the lowest state taxes in the nation on to fund roads and to fund infrastructure. And a lot of people say that tax it's not a lot of people. It's just the fact of the matter is that tax is not a growing source of revenue for the state. The cost to build highways and repair bridges, that cost consistently goes up, but the 18-cent per gallon tax on gasoline is not producing new revenue. It's not like a sales tax where it's tied to the price of a gallon of gasoline. It's just every time you buy a gallon of gasoline, you pay 18 cents. And when that tax was put in place in the late 1980s, I guess, cars probably got what, 10 to 15 miles per gallon. Now they get, anywhere from 20 to 30 to, a hybrid probably gets what, 40 to 50 miles per gallon. So
right.
There's more people driving, but the cars are so much more energy efficient. That's impacting how much revenue that tax brings in. So that's part of the problem that the Department of Transportation is facing. And this week, the House and Senate, both the House and Senate Transportation Committees are going to meet jointly to hear from the Department of Transportation about how their needs and how they don't have revenue to meet those needs. Then the following week, probably there's going to be a meeting. The two committees are going to meet again jointly to hear from MEC about its proposal to accelerate Mississippi. And what the two chairs are trying to do is to build support among the membership to start with the members on the two transportation committees to build support for some type of revenue increase before they move forward with any type of legislation. But like I said, we just have to see where it goes. There's a lot of support for some type of program to enhance infrastructure in the state, but whether there's support to pay the money to do that remains to be seen.
Willie Simmons, state senator from Cleveland, he's a Democrat. He noted that this is a bit of an urgent issue in his eyes. How urgent is it, Bobby, from those you talked to?
Well, I guess, it depends on who you talk to, but we all drive on the highways, and the business community is particularly interested in this. The farm community is particularly interested in this, like chicken growers, for instance. They say that because of substandard rural bridges, they're having to go way out of their way to make deliveries to get their products to market. School districts say they have to take their buses on unusual route or not direct routes to avoid dangerous bridges. And we all drive on the highways and roads and know how good or how bad they are. I think at this particular time there's more interest in maintaining the roads we have them, and of course in that mix, though, you still have real pockets of needs out there, like a lot of people up in Union and Tipple County would say, and Pontotoc County would say 4-lane and Highway 15 up through that area is a real need, and the people that drive on that every day see that need. So the highway department says to maintain the money they have now is not really enough to even maintain the highways that they have now, much less do much new construction. So you have there seems to be a general consensus among most people that the state has several big infrastructure needs, and like I said, the question is how do you deal with those needs as far as revenue?
Yeah, the study done by the MEC, the Mississippi Economic Council, found that there are 936 state bridges and more than 24,500 miles of state highways in disrepair, and locally, close to 3,000 bridges and more than 13,000 roads are in need of repair. So we'll see how that.
The important thing there too, Brad, they say those numbers are not going down; they're going up unless there's some type of new program put in place.
All right, let's move on to superintendents. I believe we talked about this a little bit last week, but there's been some movement on it, Bobby. Back on Thursday it was, the Senate passed a bill that would let the 55 elected superintendents serve their 4 years of their current term. Then after that, the local school boards would hire each district's top administrator. So, as we've talked about, some Mississippi school districts have elected superintendents, others have appointed ones. There's a push to make them all appointed. So, what's next for this one, for this bill?
Well, it goes to the House, and it's a couple of things. It's interesting. I mean, the legislature is kind of, you could say, been sitting on its hands for about the first month of the session. And this is really the first major piece of legislation that's been passed. So that tells you a lot about the importance that the leadership puts on this legislation. Now, the second thing is this legislation has passed the Senate multiple times. Or it has run into trouble is in the House. Yeah. So now the legislation has passed the Senate again without about a pretty wide margin, and that goes back to the House, and the thought is that it's going to pass the House this year. I mean, most of the smart money is that there will be just a simple majority vote in the House, and the smart money is that there's going to be enough members new members elected who support an appointed superintendent to finally pass in the House this year and send it on to the governor, who also supports it. So most people think that it's going to pass this year. And, as you mentioned, 55, we have, I think about 100, and I don't have the number right here in front of me, about 140 school districts right now, 55 appointed superintendents, and that's about a third of all the appointed superintendents in the nation. So some people argue that, if we were one of the top performing school districts statewide in the nation, then you can make the case that it's good to have elected superintendents. But they say, our school systems for the most part struggle. So they say it makes sense to do like the rest of the nation does and appoint all superintendents. Now, some people would also point out, though, that in studies done in Mississippi, there's not a lot of difference in student achievement in the districts where you have appointed superintendents versus districts where you have elected superintendents. So those are just some of the issues, but the momentum seems to be for making all superintendents appointed.
Bobby, as far as those who favor it, you take, for instance, Gray Tollison. He's the Senate Education Committee chairman. He says it'll be easier for appointed superintendents to make those tough decisions as opposed to someone who's feels beholden to the electorate.
Yeah, has to run for office every 4 years. That's right.
Right. And on the other hand, people like having a voice.
That's right. People like having a voice. I think the argument that makes the most sense, particularly, most of the districts that have elected superintendents are rural or county districts, and some of those districts are big districts like DeSoto County, suburb of Memphis, or here in the Jackson area. Madison County's appointed Madison County's elected superintendent, and it's a big district. But a lot of these districts are smaller districts, and you have to be a superintendent in Mississippi, you have to have an advanced education degree, and you have to have several years of experience. And to run for the office of superintendent, you also have to live within the district you're running, or you're going to be running for the office. So in so many cases, in so many of these smaller counties, there's just one or two people who meet the criteria to be the superintendent, who have the advanced degrees and who have the experience. So the argument that if a school board could go outside of the borders of their district and find the best person available for the job, who it might be somebody in North Mississippi from South Mississippi, or may even be somebody from out of state. But it just makes sense to not limit your choices for they equate it to Ole Miss. When it went to look for a football coach, they didn't look just in Lafayette County. They looked, they did a nationwide search, and so they say the same should be available for school superintendents.
All right, now, Bobby, it's the part of the show where we look at three things of note from the legislature this past week. Most impactful legislator, most impactful legislation. and the strangest or most unusual occurrence. So, Bobby, let's start with the most impactful lawmaker or
Well,
legislator this past week.
I'm going to say you mentioned Gray Tollison, Senate Education Committee chair. He got he's from Oxford. He got the superintendent's bill out of his committee quickly and got it took it up one day in committee, passed on the floor of the Senate the next day, and sent it on to the House. So I'm going to say him. Plus, he is going to. There's if you go and look at on the legislative webpage, there's tons of education bills filed this year. Everything from changing the funding formula for the mechanism for funding local school districts to more school choice options to weakening the State Board of Education's taking some of its authority away. So he's going to have a full plate, and he's already passed the what is, I think, the most significant piece of legislation thus far this session. This is still young session. So I say Gray Tollison.
And now the most impactful legislation this week.
Well, Gray Tollison is the most impactful legislator. I guess he say that appointed superintendent's bill would make sense.
And finally, Bobby, most unusual thing to occur down there in Jackson this week.
Well, unusual, unique may be a better word for what I'm going to talk about, Brad. The House passed legislation this last week, to name the Public Employees Retirement System building after former House Speaker Tim Ford, who died last February, I think it was. He's a Baldwin native and served as House Speaker for 4 terms. Served 6 terms in the House. Was a very influential legislator. He lived part of it. His district while he was in office included the Baldwin area and also parts of Lee County into northern Tupelo. And part of his time in office, he lived in Tupelo. Other parts he lived in Baldwin. But he was impactful. And what is also so unusual and unique, and I don't know if you'll see it again in Mississippi, is after his 4 terms as Speaker, he was succeeded by Billy McCoy, who is also from Prentiss County, from the Rienzi area, and he served 2 terms as Speaker. And to make this even a little bit more unique, there's already the Department of Transportation building is named after Billy McCoy. And then, so if this legislation passes the Senate and is signed by the governor, the PERS building on the other side of the Capitol will be named after Tim Ford. So you have 2 buildings surrounding the Mississippi Capitol named for 2 speakers from Northeast Mississippi, from Prentiss County. So that's kind of unique. And just as a side note, there's already a building named after former Speaker Walter Sillers. So he's not from Northeast Mississippi, but so you could potentially have 3 buildings surrounding the Capitol named after former House speakers. So that's why you don't have any buildings around the Capitol named after governors or lieutenant governors. People say the Speaker is a powerful position, and I guess that kind of proves the point right there.
I guess so. Well, Bobby, thank you again for giving us some good insight on what's going on down there in Jackson. Again, if you missed any of this episode of Capitol View, just watch the replay. We'll have it here at djournal.com. And we're doing this again every Monday afternoon during the current legislative session. We'll have Bobby on to talk about the latest happenings down there at the Capitol. So until next week, we'll see you then.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Bobby.